Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon, and joining me, my host companion, Sejohn Sarowick. Sejohn?
You sound so professional this week. I feel really bad. I feel like I'm not bringing my A game when you start talking like that.
Well, here's the thing. I listened to our episodes from 2 and 1 year ago, and in addition to learning that because of this unique thing that we've done, every episode, the week that it's released, that it's a report episode, is always a report episode. Like last year, it was the conflict report, and the year before that, it was the Kirby report, meaning that this is a report episode. Like that kind of like blew my mind. But history repeats itself. Thunder only happens when it's raining. I always hit this week's episode hyper professional, and then you, like last year, you just weren't ready for your cue. There's like a nice second of dead air before you realize I was talking to you. So it's good. It's good. That means that, if history is actually cyclical, we're right on track, buddy.
Man, I think it's because I'm just never prepared for you to suddenly be professional about this show. I think that's what that proves.
Well, if it's any consolation, I came home from work today, the first day of classes where I work, and immediately just passed out. And I just woke up at spoilers behind the curtain, behind the candelabra, behind the Mac Mini. I woke up at 8:59, and we record at 9 o'clock Eastern on Monday nights. So I walked downstairs and was like, I gotta do it. At least I did my nasal spray before the show. But then I think to overcompensate, I'm like, I'm gonna be hyper professional in this opening. Because I have the microphone featured in the NPR ad on Facebook on learn how to podcast for only $19. Over 67 hours of content.
So there you go, folks. Professionalism on this podcast is a symptom, not a feature. Oh man. So it's your first day back at it's not your first day back at work though, right? Like you've been working all summer, haven't you?
Right. But I took off Friday. So it was my first day back from a nice self-inflicted long weekend, which is
Nice.
that might be my favorite phrase I've ever come up with. But also, in addition to it being a long weekend, I wrung every second of enjoyment out of the past 3 days. Honestly, me coming home and going to sleep makes perfect sense because, there's a way that you're supposed to treat your body. And it's not like I did anything hyper illicit. There was no drugs or alcohol involved in wringing out every second of enjoyment from the past 72 hours.
No, but please, Devin, please put on this recording for posterity, how you how you treated your body this weekend.
How I treated my body this weekend? Should I go by chronological, anti-chronological, which I guess is reverse chronological? Are we
anti-chronological? So out of time. Time does not exist in this story. No, man. What's up? What was the big stuff? Hit the highlights.
So the big stuff is on Friday. I was convinced. Okay, so the big news is I have registered for, and by all accounts should be competing in a live Link to the Past randomizer tournament at the end of October.
Oh yes.
It's going to be down in Herndon, Virginia, right where Dulles International Airport is. It's at the Washington Dulles International Hilton, and it's a super small event. It's not like my first semi speedrunning event is not going to be something like Games Done Quick or TwitchCon. It is limited to 250 attendees, people who are playing and people who are just viewing. So it should be a bit more intimate.
Yeah, I mean, that's still a pretty decent crowd, man. Especially for your first event. This is big.
Yeah, I mean, limited to 50 participants in the whole thing. But because I registered for it, you can do one of two things. You can just go, and they'll seed you based on, I don't know what it's going to be. or you can participate in up to 5 qualifying matches, and depending on how well you act in those matches, that's where your placement will be and who you'll be against.
Oh, okay.
So this started for me last Wednesday. The first match was at 8 p.m. and I've been sort of out of practice with it, and I'm kind of happy to get back into Link to the Past Randomizer.
From the Twitch streams you've been putting out, but yeah, okay, sure, you're lagging behind, man.
Well, that's an interesting thing. We'll get there once I catch up in time with the comment that was said to me about me as a Link to the Past runner that really kind of blew my mind.
Once you defeat anti-time.
Oh, anti-time. Yeah. Take that, Koa Baron Sasha. Yeah. Yeah. Through the Looking Glass references. Just in time for a special episode about The Matrix on Thursday. No. So.
Oh, man.
But yeah, so I've been doing that. And so Friday is going to be my second qualifier because the qualifiers end this coming Wednesday. So I had to get 5 in. I decided that I was actually doing this last Wednesday. So this has only been decided, and I've only been registered for less than a week, 5 days. And Friday was when I'm like, I need to participate in this. And I was convinced that it was at 7 p.m. Mm-hmm. So I took the day off, and Friday Dale has off anyway. So I'm like, here's the deal. We go out into the world, we have to be home by 6 p.m. And then I'm going through the thing, and I'm like, oh, it's not till 11 p.m.? Good news. We can be out in the world until 10 p.m. Let's do this. So we left the house at 10 a.m., went and got breakfast, and then just drove around Connecticut. And it is so crazy as someone who lives in the state of Rhode Island, which you can drive through in 20 minutes on 95. Yep. You actually need to work at it to spend more than 20 minutes on the road in Rhode Island. I would just be honest.
If you're going anywhere from Rhode Island to anywhere in Rhode Island, if you're spending more than 15 minutes in the car, you went the wrong way.
Yeah, you did the wrong thing. Or you packed a lunch. So it's crazy that sort of 10 minutes away from where I live in Rhode Island, you can go to Connecticut, where literally I spent 12 hours driving around.
Doing what?
Well, shopping at exotic Targets and Connecticut only stores. Stores
every good young white Rhode Islander, I was warned to never go to Connecticut for more than an hour.
I mean, I get that. I especially get that as I've seen more and more of it now that I have friends in Connecticut, and I'm starting to see areas that the connective tissue that I didn't know existed between points of interest in Connecticut, I've now seen, and I understand why you were warned away from the Constitution State. You're not wrong in that warning. Someone did the right thing for you. But I've seen some interesting things. We tried to see Angel Has Fallen. This is the first Say report that I didn't see a new movie before coming to record. Because we got into Angel Has Fallen.
Bum, bum, bum.
It was a 1 p.m. showing. And we got there our normal time that we get to the theater, half an hour before. And inside, the theater was already packed. And so it's oh, okay. So we didn't get the seats that we usually get. We took not bad seats, but seats that were less than par. And then as we're sitting there, a guy comes in, sits immediately behind us. And the theater was packed, but there was room for him to not squat in the, and when seats are off from one another, high school auditorium style.
Sure.
His was immediately between Dale and I, and he was very sick. You probably shouldn't have come out to the movie today, sir.
Oh, no.
So we both looked at each other and we're so let's go, right? Because we might not have Movie Pass anymore, but we do have a As Many Movies As You Want program that we're enrolled in. The A-list from AMC stubs. And so we're let's go. It's okay. We can go. We can figure it out later. So we leave, but that drained our energy because we were all right, we're drained. We'll see a movie. That'll recharge the batteries. That's plugging in the lightning cable into us as human beings. So we had to like power through until we had energy again.
Oh man. So
So a lot of surface streets until we found this steakhouse that I didn't know was a chain called Dakota that I first ate at in the Berkshires. And I actually think the Berkshires one is closed. But there's also one in like Rocky Hill, Connecticut.
okay,
So
so
we're
they're
like,
all in that kind of like northeastern area.
yeah. So we're like, yeah, okay, let's do that. Let's go for steak. Steak energized us. And then we just like, I'm like, I bet I can follow surface streets and figure out how we get home. And on the way, we'll have an adventure.
So I want that on a T-shirt. Steak energized us. Like,
So we did that. And then on the drive home, Dale's like, I could do some mini golf. And I'm like, me too. And then, as if the skies above opened, there was a mini golf course to our right. And there was no signage before it. Like, it literally was like that mini golf course called to us.
you have got to be careful with side of the road mini golf. All right. Have you ever heard the story about Zach and me and the family and how we went to side of the road mini golf and we had to leave after like 2 holes?
No, I haven't. But is it because literal black mold on every hole? Literal fungus growing on the
It's
green?
like that. Let's put it this way. It turned out it was in some dude's backyard,
Oh,
and
God.
every setup was like, oh, this is my turned over wheelbarrow with a piece of fucking cardboard sitting next to it. Like it was that style. And we started to take a couple of shots, and then my dad goes, are those animals like on his farm, or are those just roaming free animals? And sure enough, there was like, it was like Noah's Ark. There was just like a raccoon here, a possum there, just all around us all of a sudden. And we and the family entirely like backed away slowly and got in the car and left. I was never allowed to pick a side of the road attraction again.
Oh, that makes sense. It seems like you learned a valuable lesson that day. And I will say this one that we were at, maybe like one step above it. Like it was definitely a business, but it was in a parking lot behind a Dairy Queen. And we pull up to the mini golf place, and there's a big sign that says, if you want to golf, enter the Dairy Queen. But like, it's a building. It's a building where someone should be working. So I'm like, yeah, you're doing this. You're walking over there. I'm not walking over there. I've been driving all day. So Dale walks over, and then she walks back, and I'm like, do you have like balls? Like, what's happening? She's like, oh no, you'll see. And a girl comes from outside the Dairy Queen and puts a hat on that is the name of the mini golf thing. She was working a split shift between the two.
I assure you, we are open.
Yeah.
Shit, man.
It was super clerky. And then she's like, all right, so there's like a double decker hole. Don't hit at the far like hole because you will lose your ball. So take 2 balls because there's a good chance you're going to lose the ball anyway, but that is one that we know is broken. And I don't know if you've played a lot of mini golf, but on some of those holes, like there's one of them that you're supposed to hit it in is very obviously the far hole. So you hit to the closer hole and you have terrible lie. And let's just say I hit the 5-stroke minimum a couple of times. And there's no reason it should have happened. But, you know, you hit the ball and it slowly stops because, you know, the green is sticky and wet. And then you touch it and you're like, oh, that's black mold. That's cool.
Yeah, so, signs of a bad mini golf course. If it looks like there's a water feature, but there's no water in it, don't go.
Yeah, no, there was a bunch of frogs. in an empty water feature.
If there's not a single moving thing, don't go.
Yes, valuable lessons learned, but also it was that kind of day that we'd been having. So then we get home at like 9 o'clock and we're like, okay, so then I did my race and I had a good race and then I went to sleep. But I went to sleep at like 2 in the morning because I was like full of energy from the race. So it wasn't a great scene. Also, Friday I was featured on the big board. They're like, Fox Zero, you haven't been featured on the main channel. We'd like to showcase you. I'm like, yeah, sure, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So like now I'm under scrutiny, even though like I'm kind of half asleep. Bonus.
Nice.
So it was a good time though. Had a good time. Then
Yeah.
Saturday rolls around and I get a text from one of my friends in Connecticut, and he's like, "Jay, you want to come over?" I'm like, "I can come over, but I need to leave by 5:00 because I have a race at 7." But I went over there. We beat Mega Man X2, and we tried to beat Chippendale Rescue Rangers 2. But emulation has problems sometimes, where if you hit 2 buttons, it resets the game.
Oh.
So halfway through the game, I like hit the 2 buttons and did that like completely accidentally. And I'm like, oh shoot. Well, I need to go.
You losing?
I'm like, no.
I gotta go. Sorry, it reset.
No. It was a cooperative thing. I had lost all of my lives, but you know, I did that thing that in co-op games where like you hit start or you hit select to maybe steal a life from the other player. And there apparently wasn't enough time between when I hit start and when I hit select. Like they registered at the same time, so it reset the system.
Ouch.
So that was fun. And then I came home, did another race, and was like, oh, okay. Well, now I'm like a little tired. And I went and got Chinese food before the race, and, you know, life just happened the way that it happens. And that was the night that my mother, like, they were awake because the race was at, 8:00, and it's the weekend, and my parents were also there. They were leaving the next day to go on a trip. So they're packing because no Deckard packs prior to the trip. We're people who packed the night before. So they're packing, and then I tell them when I finished, and that one, I finished like 20th out of 24 runners, and a lot of those people had like forfeited, like they didn't finish. So I was one of the last people to actually finish the run. And that is because, like, just bad placement of items. Like, Ouch. If you made the wrong decision, you would be following a dead end until you get to the wall and then have to backtrack.
Yeah.
And my mother, very, like, prominent, is like, it's crazy. You are the best person that I know at this game. And there are still so many people out there who are better than you. But I have no, like, proof of that. It's so weird to think that, like, I don't know anybody better than Devon. And that's true, because she doesn't. To which my father's like, yeah, but also, Devon probably doesn't play that game near as much as other people. And it was nice. It was like this nice moment where, like, oh, Dad kind of understands what I'm doing. I don't know if he approves or disapproves of the fact that I don't practice as much as other competitors.
Hey, dude, it's fatherly acceptance. You're never going to know if he actually cares.
Right. And I should just be happy that I got a level of fatherly acceptance. Some people don't even get that.
And take that as your tidbit of toxic masculinity for the day.
Yeah, so that whole thing. And then Sunday, I had to take my parents to the train station at 6 a.m., and I had a match at noon, so I'm like, well, I'm going to sleep. That's what the responsible thing to do is, take a little nap. But I came home, and Balls of Fury was starting.
Well, fuck responsibility then.
You gotta watch Balls of Fury. Balls of Fury is such a good movie. And it led me to a thesis that I'm not 100% ready to like share. It's not done yet, but the start of this whole idea that I have in my mind.
Balls of Fury. It's a movie that gets you thinking. I'll give you that.
Also, I can't believe how many people who are in that movie I've actually interacted with, like face to face. Like that was interesting. I know I dropped this, Dale. Here you go. No, it's just weird. I'm like, oh, George Lopez, you're in this movie. I forgot about that. I had a job before you came along once. But it seeded the garden of me following through whether or not 2007 was the last golden year of Hollywood releases.
Maybe Hollywood comedies.
I don't know, man. I just know that was the year I saw more movies in theater than any other year. Like there was the year where I saw 200 new movies in the theater, but it was the year where I saw movies multiple times the most. Like I saw 300 4 times, TMNT 4 times, Hot Fuzz 7 times. Like, it was movies that I wanted to see multiple times were coming out in
I mean,
2007.
it's a pretty formative year. I mean, I wonder if we'll look back on it in 10 more years. I wonder if we'll look back at 2007 like we look back on 87 now, 86, that time period.
Yeah. It's just,
Um,
I didn't realize it until I was watching Balls of Fury, and I'm like, this can't also be 2007, right? And
every
it
decade
is.
has that year
Yeah.
though where it all kind of hits, right? Like what's the one of the 90s where like three we talked about it the other day, like
94.
Johnny Mnemonic and yeah. It's crazy like when all of those movies kind of coalesce like that. I mean, it's a 1 in 10 shot, I guess, if you really want to break it down. But every decade does have that year where you're just kind of like, man, that was the good year of movies that decade.
Well, I mean, what started it was, wow, Balls of Fury came out 12 years ago. 12 years ago. This movie does not feel like it's 12 years old.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing, is that not only did it come out with movies that, like, I wanted to consume more and more and more, a lot of them sort of feel timeless in a way that the films I'm seeing now definitely do not.
Well, a lot of instant classics that year. I mean, you talk about like 300 and you talk about Hot Fuzz. I mean, two movies that have now gone down in film history in the decade that they were out, like became formative films for filmmakers now. There's people out there that have been aping 300 since the day it came out. And I mean, Hot Fuzz, you'd be hard pressed to find a film buff out there that doesn't talk about their love of that movie and the way that he made that film,
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, what else is that year? Like, I'm sure you could name two or three more others that we pretty much consider like formative films. And
Well, I'm fairly certain that is the year that we like started doing the double features in Lincoln. So we saw things like Ocean's 13, Rise of the Silver
Queen.
Surfer. Oh, The Queen was the year after. That was in 2008. Okay. But like Stardust, Chuck and Larry are married. That's not the name of that movie, but that's a better title.
Chuck and Larry get married. Actually, yeah, that is a better one.
It rhymes. Hairspray. What was that?
Do we have to remake Chuck and Larry?
I guess that sounds like a sequel. Chuck and Larry got married.
Can we play? Can we have Terry Crews just play the same character though? Like everybody else, we could recast, but
that was also, I mean, Terry Crews was definitely in Dodgeball 2 years prior, but he's got that role as Freddy Fingers in Balls of Fury. He has that role in Chuck and Larry. Like it was a really formative thing as far as what cinema is today. Like that's why I'm like, I need to look into this deeper. I need to bring this to Sejohn, and you've already thrown more fuel on the fire supporting 2007 as like a big year of cinema. But I did my race, and oh my god, the mess of races. Like one progressive item, and it was on Zora. Oh, it was terrible. And then after that, I got a text message while I was racing asking if I wanted to go to the Mohegan Sun buffet, which I've never done before.
Really?
Yeah,
it's actually really weird for like a Rhode Islander to not have done that. Your family's not huge on gambling though, right?
No, I mean, like I've definitely been to the casinos.
But like my parents go to the casino once a week.
Yeah,
like,
no, that's
okay.
My family's not huge on buffets, is I think the bigger thing, and I believe that stems from the fact that they travel a lot and their preferred mode of travel is cruise ships. So, like, buffets are how you eat on cruise ships. So if we're at home and we're going to go eat somewhere, better to go eat at a restaurant than to, like, ape the way that they act while they're on ships. I'm not disappointed about it, but it was, do you want to come to the buffet? We have a free pass, and we don't want it to go to waste. And I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. Even though I was, like, exhausted and kind of just wanted to stay home. But I did that, and I definitely overindulged. So I was kind of sick all night after that. And I watched Back to the Future, because from Balls of Fury to Back to the Future, that was my Sunday. And some other things that I'm excited to talk about, but like all of that. Like I can't think of a moment where I wasn't doing something from Friday. I mean, I woke up and watched Hackers at 8 o'clock on Friday morning. So from 8 a.m. through to like 10 p.m. last night, I can't think of a second where I wasn't doing something. It totally makes sense why I came home and was like, all right, I'll just shut my eyes for a little bit. And then 4 hours later, oh, I have to record tonight. Which I have other things to talk about. But Sejohn, what have you been up to? I've been talking for like half the episode.
Well, Devon, while you were having your fantabulous weekend and everything else was going around, the world was spinning, Disney and Sony were falling apart, and the whole world just didn't know what it was going to do with themselves. And we were saved by a man that has saved us many times before, and he clearly felt that he needed to come and save us once again. Devon, I don't know if you're going to give two shits about this, but Good Eats is back.
What, Landon Alger?
Yeah. Alton Brown is back to show us the way once again to make good goddamn cooking television. I'm so excited. The very first episode of the new season, it's called specifically Good Eats: The Return, it is up on YouTube now. I think the rest of the series is going to have to be one that I don't think it's going to be available on YouTube TV. I'm probably going to have to go out and find some other way of watching it. And it is the kind of show that I'm probably pretty willing to buy episode per episode on like Amazon. So I got to see if that's going to be the way that it happens. Because it's like, it's one of those things that I've known was coming, and I knew that I cared about it, but I didn't realize how much I cared about it until I was watching it. And I was just like, this is fantastic. This is perfect. This is everything that I want out of TV right now. It's really funny because like so for anybody that like first of all never watched Good Eats, it's basically like Bill Nye the Science Guy or Beekman's World but for cooking. So a lot of like silly sketches, a lot of silly like puppetry and things like that, and animatics and stuff to like teach you about how cooking works, right? And it was on for 15 years, I think, something more than that. And the big thing about it is it's the only real show that's ever survived every iteration of Food Network. Like, I don't know if anybody out there has ever paid attention to what was going on at Food Network, but it changed hands about 5 times in about 10, 12 years. And every time it did, it became a completely different type of network. At one point, it was a travel network, really. It was really more about like food around the world. At one point, it was a lot more like cooking show, like having a lot of really weird, like different cook artists to the point where they even had like the next Cook Star, Food Network Star, or whatever it was, where they were basically building up like the likes of a new Alton Brown, or more closely somebody like a what's his nuts there, Guy Fieri, yeah, stuff like that. But there was also a period of time when it was all about doing really silly gimmicky shows, and that's where you got like Man versus Food kind of shows. Although I think that one was travel, but like those style of like competition shows, Cupcake Wars, nonsense like that would start coming out, right? So the thing about Good Eats is it is the only show that really carried over from one to the other to the other to the other. Every other show would kind of get the axe, and every 5 years you'd see like a different type of program. But in the 3 different iterations, there was Alton Brown just doing his thing, right? And it's because it's so fucking simple. It's so easy. He picks one recipe, one for the entire episode, sometimes more, but generally the idea is just let's do this one recipe and let's break down every aspect of it, the science of why it works, how you can improve it or make changes if you want, and here, let me cook it for you finally. And so like you just watch that in motion and it's perfect. And so in coming back and bringing the show back in this new iteration, he's gone right back to that formula. He has made no bones about the fact that like we're not spending any more money than we have to. We clearly have more money this time because everybody clearly loves us. But we're not going to spend like uber amounts of money. We never did that. It's still going to be sock puppets, guys. Like it's still going to be that. And like so seeing that kind of stuff happening with the backing of more cash, making it just a teeny bit more glamorous, right, was kind of awesome. And then like getting to see him make just a simple chicken parmesan, spoiler alert, that's the recipe for the episode, is like gold, because it's so perfect, so simple, so not over the top that like it's not about that. And so it's very wild watching this show and having these weird like nostalgic feelings for a cooking show. But in light of like the way that everything has become huge nowadays, it was so cool to see something coming out and getting to be kind of this small thing. The other thing is it's just him. You know, there's a couple of character actors that show up for like a minute here or a minute there for like the sketches and stuff. But other than that, it's just him in a room, right? And so like it's 20 minutes of just watching this dude do his science, and it's real awesome.
I have memories that are flooding back about Alton Brown, and all of it is just like watching in the daily basement and not even really watching, just like, we need background noise for what we're
Yep.
doing as rambunctious teenagers. This is the perfect choice for that.
Yeah, man. I mean, like he was around forever, and the show gained this like cult following and became this like huge underground thing. I mean, Alton Brown now is like a Food Network like megastar. He's kind of like the Ryan Seacrest of Food Network. He secretly has a hand in everything and is pretty high up in the organization. You just don't hear about him much because he's real smart about the way that he plays like his public life, right? Like secretly Ryan Seacrest runs the world. Like look into it. I'm only half joking.
Thanks for listening to the show, because now that we've revealed him, we're going to be swallowed into him. Katamari de Seacrest.
Hey, hey, man! If that's what it takes to make this show big, I don't care. Come and take me, Ryan. There's this whole like I'll host another game show for you, whatever you want. But there's this whole world that he is now in and that he now kind of runs, and so it made sense that he was stepping away from things like Good Eats for a while because he had so much other stuff going on. So that's the other part of it, is like it's this weird thing of him kind of I don't want to say he's like retired or anything, but him realizing that like he wants to do one last go at this before he steps away a little bit. Like it feels like it's kind of that last hurrah feeling to it, which is really kind of warm and fuzzy as well, and it made me start thinking a lot about these kinds of shows that we revamp and we reboot and we laugh and we joke about these sorts of things, the return. But like when they're done well, they can be super meaningful. Like they don't always have to be obvious cash grabs. I mean, everything's a cash grab, so like whatever. Like you have to learn to deal with that at some point. But like the nature by which this show came out and it's being presented and everything about it feels so
Pure?
okay with me.
Yeah,
Pure. Like pure is a good feeling that I get from it. Now that's the other thing, is I don't know, somebody else could watch this and feel really like shit on because their childhood memories are being crapped all over because he's now putting these episodes up on YouTube or whatever the hell nonsense they want to do. But like they're valid in those feelings, and it's just making, like I said, makes me think of all these other things that have been rebooted and revamped over the last 10-15 years.
I get that. I understand. I forgot that I'm not on camera because I was like looking over at the wall and I'm like, oh god, I need to say something. They know too, but they don't know. I was just listening to you. Woo, sleepy Devon.
Yeah.
That's good though. That's something that I have never really had the feelings about Alton Brown, but I don't hold any animosity against him. It's one of those things where people are like, "Oh, I got tickets to go see Alton Brown," and I'm like, "Oh, that guy, really? Good for you, I guess."
Yeah,
I'm not mad at anybody who has those feelings. Like, derive joy from what you are. And in terms of people to derive joy from, he is super unoffensive to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, there's been some stuff over the last couple of years of calling out some of the stuff on the old show for being super kind of problematic, and it's interesting because I don't disagree. Like, I should say that first and foremost. I feel like Food is one of the last bastions of like what, and I'm putting air quotes around this when I say this word, accepted racism. Like there's this sense that like you can still be kind of weirdly racist in the food world and people seem okay with it for some reason. Like I get uncomfortable sometimes watching to stick with it, like watching old episodes of Good Eats. There are some really uncomfortable moments when he has like characters show up in sketches, or he does reenactments of historical figures, or he does a recipe and so they play like a certain type of music over it, and it's just like, okay, that's a little too on the nose to be comfortable for me. And like he's been called out on that, and I'm curious to see if that changes at all in the show. Last night again he was doing chicken parmesan, so he was talking about Italian Americans, so there was, I guess, places he could have gone but he didn't. But I mean, like that's one of the probably least offensive areas in food history that you can probably go. But anyway, like there's this idea that like he definitely lived in this world that was very different than ours, but in terms of like the people out there, from the people that were popular 15 years ago that were inoffensive, yeah, I mean, like Alton Brown's definitely top of that list, you know.
Right. Well, I think that it's an interesting thing where you talk about, again, huge air quotes, accepted racism. It sort of goes hand in hand with cooking in a way that, like, a type of racism, like racism isn't just, I hate you and here's why, or I hate you without reason. towards a different race. Appropriation is also a form of racism, and cultural appropriation and cooking are like kind of hand in hand.
Yeah,
in a
for
very
sure.
strange way. Like we all talk about how Marco Polo brought back spaghetti from the Asians, from the Chinese,
The
and it's
Asians. Yeah, great.
I couldn't remember where in Asia he brought it from, but it was China. I never watched the Netflix series Marco Polo, even though the advertisements kind of had me like, But yeah, so it's a weird thing where, like, the way that food travels and appropriation, and especially in a country like America where, you know, Chinese food, that's not really Chinese, it's Chinese American food.
Well, right, and that's actually a point that he makes about chicken parmesan and a lot of like spaghetti and meatballs. Like we call that Italian food here, but that's not Italian food. That's Italian American food. You know, and there actually used to be, and I did not know this fact I picked up from Alton Brown, learned that spaghetti and meatballs was actually at a time considered much like lobster to be a poor person's food, and actually considered super malnutritious. Like people were like, this is not the thing we should be eating every night, and you're only feeding to us because it's cheap. And then the Great Depression hit, and it became like a huge hit because the whole country started eating it, and suddenly it wasn't just a thing for poor people, it was a thing for everybody because everybody was suddenly a poor person, right? And so that's when it like took off. But it was pretty much considered like poor worker food because you could basically give them enough to survive with spaghetti and meatballs, and that's nuts to me, right? Like that's like a stock standard dish, and basically they were giving it to people like beer to the slaves back in Egypt, like to just basically keep them on their feet long enough to work.
That's why pasta dinners exist as the greatest fundraiser in the world. Because pasta is like free, and we charge people $10 a plate. Kabam!
Woohoo! Getting them scouts to.
We're going to the jamboree.
I was gonna say Vegas, and I realized that was not a good place to send scouts.
No, especially with their the way they're viewed. We don't want anything that happens in Boy Scouting to stay in Vegas.
Oh, see, and I was gonna make a very safe joke about them being thrifty, but okay.
They're also reverent. It's Sin City. I could go through the whole Scout law and riff, but I don't want to.
We'll save that joke for another day. But yeah, man, I mean, like we watched that, and it was really interesting, like going back to that and just feeling just happy for 20 minutes, you know?
That's awesome. And I'm going to use that as a wonderful pivot point, feeling good and happy for 20 minutes, to a show that you casually mentioned 2 weeks ago and that I watched all of this past week. No Good Nick on Netflix. And that's a show.
Yep.
That's definitely a show.
You watched the whole thing in like one sitting, like you can't.
Not in one sitting. I watched season 1, part 1, because I don't even know what they're playing at Netflix sometimes. I watched part 1 on Wednesday. I watched the 10 episodes of part 1 on Wednesday, and then the next day I watched Breakfast at Tiffany's, because I had breakfast at the place called Breakfast at Tiffany's in North Providence. And I'm like, I want to watch the movie. You want to talk about accepted racism?
Okay.
Yeah, no, that is the worst part about that movie, and it's a shame. Mr. Yamashiro, portrayed by Mickey Rooney.
In case we weren't clear what we were talking about.
I want to make sure that it's not like, oh, it's not Audrey Hepburn eating a donut outside of Tiffany's. Well, I wonder, like, that's a movie.
Is that the Breakfast at Tiffany's?
Yeah, that's what she is. She's not like, Tiffany's doesn't have a breakfast that she goes to. She has her breakfast outside of Tiffany's because it is the thing that she like aspires to. Devon Decker.
I meant specifically the donut, but yeah, let's get deep into the meaning of Breakfast at Tiffany's.
I don't know. It's one of those things where, like, Deep Blue Something records the song Breakfast at Tiffany's, and I feel like for an entire generation, that's all Breakfast at Tiffany's is. is a song by Deep Blue something that I still have to fight with people that it's by that band and not the Gin Blossoms, because the power of LimeWire is strong.
Oh man.
Oh, I love this Gin Blossom song. This song isn't by the Gin Blossoms. Fuck you, Devon. Nope. I mean, I know. I'm the person who would know.
I'm just happy that everybody really loves that song because hey, that's one thing we got.
Oh, so I watched No Good Nick, and spoilers, because you've seen the whole series, right? Like, I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
Okay, we're spoiling No Good Nick. That's just wicked friggin' unbalanced. Like the most unbalanced show, and I'm not upset about it. It's just
I
like
don't think it ever gets good enough to be too upset when it's not good, I guess. So I kind of get where you're going at, but I almost wonder if you actually like some parts more than me.
Oh no, trust me, I love that show. But it's a tonal imbalance. It's not really like a quality imbalance. Like Dale said, there's a real quality imbalance when she told me to like check it out, and that's it. Like enough people like told me, said No Good Nick to me, where like when you said it to me the first time, I'm like, I don't know what that is. First of all, I didn't realize it was the word no, the word good, and the word Nick.
Yep.
I thought it was just No Good Nick. Like
isn't that
like one
isn't that
thing?
such a funny play on words?
I guess. I don't.
You know that saying that everybody says, and now it's her name. Like it's such a good joke.
It's so clever.
Okay.
It's so clever. And I didn't know, and I knew Sean Astin was in it, which like I watched the first episode and I called him Dale and I'm like, so Melissa Joan Hart, if you wanted me to watch this show, that's what sells me. She was explaining it all to me when I was a boy. I can't not ever worship at the house of MJH. Be she witch or teenage girl. I never really
Lawrence in yet?
What?
Sorry, nothing. Keep going. It just occurred to me that we haven't seen Joey Lawrence yet, right?
That's what I was gonna say. Is that like the one time I may have turned my back on the Church of MJH was when Joey Lawrence was there. I don't think I've ever seen an episode of Melissa and Joey.
Oh, and the cock crowed, and I denied knowing her.
Wonderful. But that first episode, I'm like, I don't know what this show is. Like, it's a hard first episode, and then you continue, and it really kind of lays it all on the table for you. And I had a very like obvious feeling about that show, and then the second part started, the second season. Again, I don't know. And there's that episode very early on in the second season where it is revealed that Jeremy is gay, and I was just like, oh my god, what a powerful moment. And that like and all this, but then you get to the 5th episode of season 2 and it's like all these characters you love, yeah, we're gonna vilify them. How's that for something to do 15 episodes into this show? You feel good about that? You feel good what we just did? And then
no, go ahead. You finish. No, finish your thing.
And then, so they did that, and then I'm like, well, now I want them to suffer. But also in the back of my mind, I'm like, but this show can't be the kind of show where that's what she does. Like if she outs him, that's unforgivable. And as she's getting her revenge on like Molly and on Liz, I'm like, okay, so it's Jeremy's thing, and Ed's clearly been the season arc with the necklace that she's trying to steal. Huge spoilers for this show. Very sorry. I'm like, if she outs him, I'm gonna be so upset. And when the first thing she does to like tear him down doesn't work, I'm like, it's like getting to that nuclear option. And they avoided it, and it's just so good. The show's so freaking good.
Yeah, man. So my thoughts about you talking about being kind of unbalanced, I think it's really interesting that you say that, because all of the examples that you gave, what they sound like is Netflix is giving the sitcom format a chance to do some pretty outrageous things. Like you wouldn't be able to see a sitcom in this format touch on these things in this way. Like, and now you could argue because it's bad art, or you could argue because they're afraid, right? Like it all depends on like your vision of it, right? But that's what it was for me, is like watching them tackle these things and get into these conversations that felt out of place because of the nature of the rest of the show. It didn't feel unbalanced to me. It didn't feel out of whack. It felt like they're daring to go somewhere that no other sitcom can or will. So it in a weird way, like those are the kind of the defining moments of that show for me.
Right. I think where I come from is this is very much the type of show that I can definitely say I grew up with, but I'll say that you also grew up with. It feels like early Nickelodeon child sitcom. There's a feeling of like Clarissa Explains It All to it.
To a point where you could easily see this following Drake and Josh, like up to that point. I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, it feels very much like a Disney sitcom, like a Lizzie McGuire, or like one of those higher concept ones. Like I'm trying to think of something like just like a step above, like maybe even Stevens with just like the level of like dastardly things that kids do to each other,
and the
like,
absurdity of like the jokes and the filming of that show. Yeah.
Yeah. So it really feels like this product of the entertainment that we were given when we were younger. Again, you know, nostalgia, whatever. But
and there's a reason Melissa Joan Hart is there, dude. To like, I mean, even to that point, Sean Astin, like
even to that point, Jerry Trainer. Like you say, Drake and Josh, and I'm like maybe one step beyond to iCarly, just with something like the Molly Mob, and the fact that her online presence is such a big thing to her.
For sure.
It's interesting and it's cool. Like it's stuff that I enjoy, but I don't think there would ever be an episode of those shows that would end with one character just straight cold cocking another character. Like when Nick knocks out Jeremy and then the credits roll at the end of the 9th episode, I'm like, oh damn. That's just not what happens. Yeah. And the reason why I say it's tonally imbalanced is there are still episodes where Ed will get the titanium package and will get a bunch of like weird pratfally physical comedy that does not feel the same level of like artistic integrity as the sequence where he's like, you know what hurts the most? You are the only person I've shared my deepest secret with. And apparently that means nothing to you because of what you could just do to me. I'm like, this is a way higher level of like what this show is trying to say than that episode where like you just got educated.
Yeah, it's not clean by any stretch of the imagination. I will never say that the show is well done in what it's trying to do. But I think that everything that you're pointing to just definitely reaffirms my belief that like they're trying to let a show like iCarly, like Keenan and Kel, like, you know, like those concept shows that you were talking about, those sitcoms that are just a little bit higher on the food chain than some of the other stuff out there. I think they were trying to land in that space and take them just a step further, you know, and I think that that's the thing that like Netflix is always trying to do. Their shows are never going to just be stock standard versions. There's always going to be something with a twist to it, something about it, you know, like as an example, like their big attempt at doing like an Adult Swim style show with Tuca and Birdie, but they made sure to go out of their way to pack that thing with a bunch of really progressive artists, and they let 2 women take the lead on it. It's the first like 2 woman-led animated television show, and like things like that, right? Like so like they're always trying to find that thing that they can kind of hang their hat on. Like, yeah, we have our version of that too, but we did this with it. They always want to be able to say that, and I think that is the thing with No Good Nick, is I think what they're trying to do is hit that exact level of sitcom, that exact level of audience, that exact level of structure and artistic integrity, but then allow themselves to go places with it that those types of shows don't normally go, you know. And again, it's not clean. You're not wrong. There's a lot of really awkwardly like shifting moments that you kind of have to just accept. And again, I don't think that there's any moment of that show that I outright love nearly as much as even the way that you're kind of talking about a couple of moments in it. But there's also not parts of that show that I'm disappointed in nearly as much as it seems like you are. So that's interesting to me.
It's not disappointment. I want to make sure that is
okay.
What it is. It's actually what I think art needs to do, especially as we come away from like D23 and all of the shows that they're just gonna bring back for Disney Plus. those are probably going to just be recreations of the show that came before. And where I celebrate No Good Nick is that it very much is aiming for that, but also attempting to elevate it to the next level. And
Yeah.
that elevation is what I think we need in order to continue to make these things relevant. If that, I mean, I feel like I'm talking out of my ass when I say that,
No,
but
no, man. I think the thing with somebody like Disney, like this is a perfect example because you're right. They do have a bunch of stuff coming back, and we actually have a couple of examples of things that have already come out that we can look at. Raven's Home and
Girl Meets
Girl
World.
Meets World.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like we have two examples of like, yeah, they're pretty much going to just make the same show. They're not going to push too hard more than that. But I think what you're going to see with Disney is they're going to play it safe with like 90%, and then with 10%, they'll let something push a little bit. Kind of like if you look on at Andy Mack, like they allow one of their big teen shows right now to kind of really push the envelope here or there. And so it'll be interesting to see which one they let do that on the app, especially because they're going to have so much more personal control. Like all kidding aside, Disney runs everything. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But also they did have to answer to advertisers and they have to worry about things like format and things like that that we've talked about for years. Netflix doesn't have to worry about because they don't have to bow to advertisers as much, if at all, and so like Disney's gonna have a little bit more rope. So like let's see what they do with it. Are they gonna hang themselves? I don't think so. They're fucking Disney. If
yeah,
anybody can survive this, it's going to be Disney.
I don't think that they're going to hang themselves either. It's just one of those moments where, like, the stuff that you're talking about with something like No Good Nick, I mean, it's just the thing that's weird to me, the moments that don't work for me, and it's just that they don't work for me, is, like, the fact that there's a laugh track on the show. Every time that it comes in, I'm like, I feel like I haven't heard you forever because, like, serious things have been happening that didn't require canned responses. But then you'll have, like, one of the Harbaughs will, like, fall down the stairs, and it'll have, like, the little pratfally sound effects, and then canned laughter. Like, this is supposed to be the most hilarious thing you've ever seen. And I'm like, what's happening? Like, is that for the kid who's watching this?
It's a bit surreal.
Yeah.
It is a bit surreal for sure.
Like, even stuff where, like, Jerry Trainor's Todd character being, like, he's hyper intelligent and he lives at home with his mother and acts like a child. But all the stuff he, like, says when he psychoanalyzes her is pretty much on point.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, yeah, it's imbalanced. It's wildly imbalanced. I love the show regardless.
How about this? It is purposefully imbalanced.
That is actually probably, and I think that might be what my mind is having a problem getting around.
Yeah.
Is the fact that they're doing, this is very intentional because it's these moments where, oh, we did like the funny pratfall and the laugh track so that, like, you know, to ease the tension in the room.
Yeah.
And it's definitely necessary because with that stuff, the moments that are supposed to be serious, they definitely hit harder because they're, I feel like I've been using this word too much lately, but they're tempered against something like irreverent.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, like, it's a wonderful kind of experiment, and that's part of the reason why I was so behind it. And I'm behind a lot of that weird shit that comes out on not just Netflix. Like, I should stop blowing that horn for like a minute and point out like shit on Amazon, like what Amazon has been able to do with things like The Boys recently, or Marvelous. Oh man, what is her name?
Maisel.
Miss Maisel. I want to keep saying Miss Marple, and that's a different Marvelous
That's a
woman.
different show.
But yeah, like they're able to do these kinds of shows, or Hulu to that point, and you look at all of the really weird stuff with that cult show that came out, or
I don't know. I was gonna point at Difficult People.
Difficult People, yeah,
is one of those things where, I mean, this is Seinfeld, but in Seinfeld, it's weird. Like, my mother hates the characters of Seinfeld, and I get it. She still watches the show and enjoys it, but, like, in the years since Seinfeld, we've been introduced to Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and those people are way worse than anything Jerry, George, Elaine, and Kramer did. Like, way worse. And then you get to something like Difficult People, where, like, by the third season, they live in an alternate history than what we are currently living in, with things like the Quiznos Clinic and Tennessee as being a required carry state. Like, it takes it to this level of just like, oh yeah, they're bad people, but, you know, the world reflects why. That you don't see. Like, Seinfeld is very much situated in the real world.
Right,
And I've
right.
been to the parts of Philadelphia that It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia has
Although
existed in.
there's some pretty absurd shit that happens in that show that's a little beyond reality in some ways. Like,
Yes.
it exists in the FX reality. That's what I like to call it, because the League is very much seated in that. Baskets is very much seated in that. Like, there's this very specific world in which all of the FX shows seem to exist.
Yes. I don't know. It's cool. I don't know. I'm really getting to this point where I'm like happy about TV.
Yeah.
And I just like finished God Friended Me. Like, we just marathoned that to the end. And I'm so excited for the next season just because of what the show did. And then my father, though, we're all sitting there and he's like, so we're not going to watch the next season, though, right? And like the other three deckers, like, all look at him like, what the fuck is wrong with you? We're not gonna binge it the way that we did. We're going to try to watch it weekly as it airs. But I think my father just doesn't like binging, and I think that's where I get that from as well. But I've like slowly learned to binge.
Yeah, man. I don't know, man. Taking it all in one large sitting is so much more my speed. You know, I was actually just talking to somebody about this today, where they were talking about starting Justified, and I've tried to start that show at least twice, if not three times. And every time I get like 3 episodes in, really enjoy it, but then just don't go back to it. And I don't know why. It's a lot of stuff I really love. I mean, the atmosphere, the Western style, like storytelling and all that stuff, like, you know. But I think my thing is, I would much rather have like a 2.5 hour, 3 hour Western film in that style, like in that time period with those dudes, all that stuff. And like, I make it sound like it was like yesteryear, but I mean like 10 years ago in Texas. But like this idea that I can consume that particular story in that setting a little bit better. I don't know why. Meanwhile, I will wait week by week for, I don't know, like YouTube videos and stuff, I guess, because they're short form, or like Adult Swim. Like, I don't mind waiting till next week for the next absurd fucking episode of Mr. Pickles or something. There's something about like long form story that if I'm gonna invest, then I just want it all. I just want it given to me.
Right, but I think I understand where you're coming from with something like Justified, because sometimes with these, when you approach something like long form like that, it boils down to the Lost issue. And that's the fact that Lost very much had a story that they wanted to tell, but then they had to stretch it out over 6 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And when you binge a show like Justified, you want it to be pure, but then when you hit an episode that's kind of fillery, it sort of derails you from wanting to go back and watch more.
Yeah.
Because I think that's why I was able to get through 3 episodes of Daredevil, and everybody tells me that the 4th episode is the one, right? Like, it's the real, like, kingpin episode, and if I just watched it, I'd be, like, sold on the show. But those 3 episodes leading up to it, like, there's only so much I can be excited about by, like, little things from the Daredevil comic books that I already know of being featured for, like, a second. Like, it feels very fillery, and it's like, but this is a bingeable thing. Like, you could have, I don't know, because it all came out at once, maybe it's like I wasn't interested in watching a 10-hour movie, and you're telling me that, like, it's all rising action up until the 4th episode. It's difficult for me to be like, oh, well, okay, so I'll watch some boring stuff knowing something good's gonna happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's the Buffy argument. You got to get past the first season, which I fully stand behind, and I am the first person to say that to somebody. But it is definitely something that got associated with that show that people have rightly called bullshit on. Like, you shouldn't have to wait a season for a show to really find its footing and become good. At least not anymore, you know?
Right. Especially, there's just so much out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much out there that, like, if something's not working for you, rather than, like, going and trying, I'm going to go watch something else. My parents recently started Orange is the New Black, and I've been racing, because it's been so hot, I've shifted where I race these Zelda things up to the dining room. So I've been seeing episodes of Orange is the New Black, and I've been laughing out loud at stuff that happens in that show. But I remember how I felt after watching the first episode and being like, yeah, but I'm not going to do any more of this.
Yeah.
And it's weird that, like, no, but if I stuck it out, like, apparently I would have really enjoyed what this show is.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting though when you think about like jumping on and jumping off points too, you know, that's changed so much now with Netflix and Hulu and everybody kind of giving you all of the show whenever you want it, is like you can kind of jump on. It's not like in the past where you might not have jumped on until halfway through season 2 because everybody's been talking about it. You're finally going to sit down and watch it. The rest of the show is not really available anywhere. So you're just starting where you're starting, sorry, or falling off where like at some point you kind of realize it's not really worth me putting the time aside every Thursday night for an hour to watch the show. Sorry. So you kind of just walk away from it. And there's entire seasons of shows that people just never saw, or like entire endings of shows that people kind of just forgot about because they dropped off in season 3, right? And like that doesn't happen anymore. Now you have access to the whole thing at once. So like there's no excuse for that, right? So it's hard for me to say to somebody like, just watch an episode of Daredevil, like just watch this particular episode. When that happens, and I'm not saying that it doesn't, because there has definitely been moments where I felt like, oh, watch this arc of this show. Oh, they do such a good job at the beginning of season 4, just kind of reintroducing characters that fuck the rest of it. Just watch season 4, right? Warehouse 13 is a perfect example of that. I think season 3, I believe, of that one is the one where they introduce the other agent, and there's this whole story with this Pinocchio. I don't really want to give too much away, but like it's a really it's one of the best seasons of TV I've ever seen. I find it really hard to recommend seasons 1 and 2 of Warehouse 13 unless you're a particular type of nerd. Like there's a particular type of geek out there that I think really would enjoy that show. Everybody else could probably leave it where it stands. And that sucks because I think season 3 should be seen by everybody. Right. Yeah. And so like it's weird to like think about that can't, there's not a chance for that to really exist anymore with the fact that everything drops on the same day, the fact that everything's available now into perpetuity, supposedly. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those. That's exactly it. Because I'm not just gonna jump into an episode of like the second season. I'm going to go back and I'm going to try to watch everything up to that point.
Right.
And that second season could be great and fix a lot of the issues with the stuff that came before. But if that first season doesn't work for me, I'll say, well, I'm not gonna try it. Like I don't see the reason. It's weird, and I blame 2 things. The first thing that I would blame is DVR coming into my life. So like you have this ability to watch everything, even if it's just via taping. And the second thing that I would blame is How I Met Your Mother, because like that was a show that sort of brought back serialization to the half-hour show.
Yeah,
and that's what TV is now. Not that, like, Frasier didn't have continuity or Cheers didn't have continuity.
There's a difference, though, between continuity and serialization.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that, like, it wasn't how... I want to make sure that I don't sound like I'm saying How I Met Your Mother was the first show to have, like, existing continuity.
No, but How I Met Your Mother could end on a downer note and it would continue on into the next week. It wasn't every episode of this is going to end on a happy note and everything's going to be okay next week. Or Honeymooners style, this is going to end on him losing his job, but next week he's going to go right back to driving that bus. Like, that's not... That
bugged the
How I
crap
Met Your Mother
out of me.
allowed that to not happen.
Oh, yeah, that bugged the crap out of me. That's my favorite episode of Family Guy. Which, like, that's something that I've been doing. They've been showing the first 3 seasons of Family Guy on Adult Swim again. I say that like it's like absurd that they're doing that. But I realize just, like, if I had to make a top 5 episodes of Family Guy, I'm pretty sure 4 of them would be from those original 3 seasons.
I was just gonna say, I think I can think of maybe one late season episode that I might point to, but the rest of it would be that.
What would your late season episode be? Just if
the weed episode is the first one that always springs to mind. I'm sure that I could find another one that I love a little bit more, but specifically the 420 episode where Brian and Stewie have the whole weed song and the whole thing is about marijuana.
I mean, mine would be Meet the Quagmires. The Back to the Future like episode parody.
I do like that one.
That episode is just
screwing it up.
Like it's just so funny. Not just the screw, just now I know what a TV dinner feels like. Huh? Die Hard. It doesn't exist yet, Brian.
We could write it. Oh,
like
God.
yeah, and I watch, and every time I watch Back to the Future, I want to then watch that Family Guy. So like that just speaks to just how good that exists in the form of like satire, parody, homage.
Nice. Yeah.
But then like the trophy episode, like season 2, episode 5,
Yeah, man.
is such a good episode of Family
I
Guy.
love the ending of it with Rod Serling and Tim Bryan out in the yard. Oh, God.
Like I just put it on to like fill it, and then I found myself saying all of the lines, and I'm like, I did not realize how much this episode got into my head.
You know what it is, late season? It would be the Next Generation episode where Stewie gets everybody from the Next Generation, and which is actually, I think, the B plot in that episode, right?
Yeah,
That's not even the
which
main
is
plot.
the craziest thing about that episode. The real crazy thing about that episode is that American Dad talked about how they were going to have Patrick Stewart as a guest star that night, and it's the TNG, and I'm like, Patrick Stewart's on American Dad all the time. Way to go, marketing at Fox.
Oh, man.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's just weird how TV has changed. As it's, I don't even know if it like streaming is a separate platform.
It really is. Yeah. I know, man. Well, and you know, so then you find yourself making really weird arguments with yourself. Like as an artist, I struggle with the idea that streaming shows have all this freedom and flexibility that TV doesn't. So is it fair that they're nominated for the same awards?
I mean, is it fair that Netflix movies are able to be nominated for Oscars?
Yeah. I mean, like, and as an artist that wants to first of all support that idea, like I'm like, fuck yeah. I mean, like they put the same work in, the same effort. Why should they not be recognized when their work is clearly better? All because they didn't come out on a big screen for 3 months, which is apparently going to be required if anybody wants to see The Irishman at the awards this year. And like, and to me, that's ridiculous. But then at the same time, like, it's not that Netflix gets to play its own game and its own rules because it's not part of that. So does that award really represent the best in the field when they're playing on a different field? Like, it's weird. It's a really weird conversation for me to like continually have to have with myself.
Well, it would be like if one NFL team like had wheels on the feet of all of its players. It'd be like wheeled players is not the rules of this game. Like you have to play by the rules of the game in order to be considered someone who excels in it.
Yeah.
And that's where it comes from.
But then, you know, like you know, my first thought is, shouldn't the game be allowed to change every now and then? Like, shouldn't we grow? Shouldn't we try new things? So it's weird because
it's an argument. You're not wrong because you're not because growth is the thing. I mean, when you're green, you grow. When you're ripe, you rot. That's something that I've been told my entire life. But it's also strange where it's like I think I'm done with the Oscars. I mean, I clearly am. I didn't watch them this year. I didn't pay them any heed. Where like, and that was the weird thing as I started my thesis on 2007 and like what is a good movie in that year is like, I'm going to have to look at the Oscars and what like won that year, what was nominated. And I'm like, but why? It doesn't matter now in 2019 to you. Why does it still have that reverence, 12 years ago? And it's like, well, because 12 years ago, it did have that reverence. It earned that respect from me. And it's just the way that they've acted and the way that they've been like resistant to change and trying to preserve this old guard that sort of made me say, maybe you're not worth the same level of respect I gave you then.
Yeah, I mean, even as like an entertainment show, I've had some issues with it, and I think that I've never really recovered from the world's reaction to Seth MacFarlane hosting, which I thought at the time was genius. Sat in a room full of people thought it was genius. Then the next day, when all of the Twitter stuff and the world came out against whatever the hell they came out against, nobody's been able to make it very clear to me exactly what he did wrong. I couldn't believe how many people that had been in that room with me, enjoyed what they saw that night, suddenly were like, I just can't believe how distasteful that was. And it's like, what? You laughed too, motherfucker. Like, what are you doing? And so like it became like the example to me of like, oh, this world is just stuck.
Yes. That's I mean, I didn't watch last year because something else came up and I'm like, I care more about this than watching the Oscars. And then this past year, like the 2019 thing, I'm like, I didn't see any of these movies. Like, I have no chit in this game. And in a weird way, I feel very freed from that. But yeah, so we're trying to talking in circles now. Anything else to add before we send her over to Will?
No, I mean, it's been a crazy week. Good luck with the link to the past stuff, man.
Yeah, my final qualifier is tomorrow at Wednesday at 11 p.m. So you can come by and watch if you want to see what I'm doing. And then at the end of October, I'm going down to Virginia, and we'll see how I work on like a real stage. Very excited to see that.
Awesome, man.
Yeah. But in the meantime, if you want to talk to him about his thoughts on streaming, entertainment, and artistic vision, feel free to catch Sejohn on Twitter at Siege versus the World.
And if you want to send any Orange is the New Black memes, you can hit Devon up at Devon D. Decker.
That's just mean. Just mean.
Spoilers!
I'm not watching it. I'm okay if it's on in the background.
You're not watching it yet.
Oh, no. Pennskentucky! All right. Will, save us from ourselves.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Stephen Selwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.